For overall questions, tech talk, and if you'd like to submit your reel for us to actually critique live, please see the links below, and we will definitely get to them in the order that they appear. All right, we are here with Mike Stan. Is it Stan?
Either way is fine. Yeah.
Fine, okay. Thanks for coming on. Mike actually works at Double Negative, which, if any of you guys are, heard around in the industry, it's one of the top compositing companies for both commercials and for feature films, and it is a definite, from what I've heard, a trial by fire. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it is a powerhouse of production. And it does separate the men from the boys, the women from the girls, so to speak, and so forth. So, without any interruptions here, I'd like to introduce you. If you could just give you a little bit of a background on where you started and where you're at today as well. So.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, thank you very much for inviting me and having me on the show. I've watched all the previous interviews, and I think the entire podcast and everything can actually help quite a lot of people get a sense of the industry and get a sense of what they have to do to get started and so on. For example, me personally, I started back in Romania. Someone pretty much recommended as a career choice if I actually wanted to take a look into like video editing or video production or stuff like that. So I just started trying to get a camera, take a few shots here and there, and basically just try to do like a video montage. And I got bored pretty quickly with it. So obviously the next step, I found Andrew Kramer and Video Copilot. Obviously, I think probably most people in my generation actually got inspired to some extent by Andrew Kramer. So I personally want to thank him right now because I really love what I'm doing. And then the next step was coming to the UK. I enrolled with the University of Bradford and took like a 3-year course in visual effects. And on the side with like all of the courses and everything else, I started looking for tutorials on some big websites. I think FX PhD was one, Video Copilot was the other, obviously. Some plural sites, and if I recall, some Gnomon workshop. I think it's a US school, or I'm not entirely sure. And then I pretty much just started working in my spare time. Finally managed to build a reel using all the materials I gathered, and I just applied to DNEG. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting to get the offer, but somehow I did. So I went there. I got a job as a technical checker, which probably perhaps that's going to be the next route into the industry for juniors, I assume. And slowly just I kind of just worked up to Compositor, yeah.
Wow, so that's okay. So you were saying technical checker is the future, or as a career?
At least for DNEG, I keep seeing a lot of people coming in as runners, and then they become technical checkers inside the TV department. So they basically just overlook shots for technical issues. So it's like when a comper finishes a shot and the supervisor kind of approves it, so on and so forth, it kind of goes into the tech check department, which is just like trying to spot mistakes like edges or grain or problems like that. And to be honest, that entire process helped me a lot with my understanding of comp and what to look for and what technical problems there are usually within a shot in terms of, I don't know, trying to make sure that the lens always works and stuff like that.
Yeah, I personally was you could call it technical checker. I was a technical artist at what is now NetherRealm Studios, and we would be tech checking models, because obviously we'd have to rig them up. So we had, anywhere from 5 to 15 modelers, and we would just be like, hey, where's the mouth cup? Where's these edge loops? Where's this? And, you need this, that. You need to retopo this and then spit it back to them. So I learned a lot just on the aspect of modeling, from understanding the transition from the model to the actual rig itself. So it's great to get into that sort of policing of assets, and also just policing of comps in your case.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to go through is a little bit of history. Obviously, starting with your education, you're from originally from Romania.
Yep.
Okay, I actually have a student who's actually from Romania. Great student, one of my best students, and his name is he goes by Misha, but he's more of a game guy. But just it seems like just a really well-rounded, just incredibly awesome guy. And anybody that I know that comes from that area of the world, it always seems like they're just really, they're ready to go. You know what I mean? And there's always seems to be an aspect, especially when you have to pick up and go out of areas where there's not a lot of VFX training and education, and you're moving over. You're motivated. You've made the move itself. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how was it for you, like moving from Romania to the UK for your education and all that?
It was pretty much a leap of faith, because I wasn't entirely sure what the options were, or if the university had any connections with the industry, or if I could somehow try and leverage anything that would kind of help me get into uni. Help me get into the industry per se. A lot of people do say that breaking into the industry is probably the most complicated thing, and then it basically just gets easier because you're in. So yeah, it was quite scary to transition across. I think the 1 year that kind of opened my eyes was the end of my second year, to some extent, because that's when I realized that getting a job is actually not that easy. So you actually do have to put in all the work. So I kind of panicked, and I froze a year out of my courses, kind of thing. So I basically just took like a gap year between second and third, and I just bought all the tutorials I could buy, and basically just tried to try to learn everything about Nuke and everything about comp in that time. And then I kind of came back to uni, did my third year, and just applied. And to my surprise, I actually got it. I still don't know how it actually happened, but I'm not willing to ask questions about that. I'm just happy that,
It's
to
a
be
God's
honest.
sovereign hand, my friend.
Yeah.
I would say that's a really great move. I did that back in college, around about junior year. I took a year off, but I just studied film. I didn't study visual effects like everybody else, which we're going to talk about later on. The allure of the industry, so to speak, in the idea of like the reality of industry and the allure of the industry. Because I kind of thought of all the topics from the previous people we were talking to. I'm thinking, what can we talk about that's kind of fresh and new, or maybe a perspective that we haven't heard yet in regards to the industry? We know that there's long work hours. We know that it's very hard, and just even what you were telling me that that you do a lot of sleeping, a lot of resting, I should say, from your job. But you love your job, which is awesome, and that's something that's so important, especially when you gruel into these hours. So this school is pretty legit, University of Bradford, as far as.
I'm not entirely sure, because, for example, what helped me sort of develop into comp, it was actually my own choice. I was like, okay, I want to get comp. I want to do only comp. I only want to eat, sleep, and drink comp. So I kind of ignored most of my modules. I'm not sure if that's good advice for people, but I kind of ignored anything that had to do with like 3D animation or whatever. I just focused on rendering, lighting, and pretty much Nuke and comp, because the former two topics kind of blend into comp. So if you have a good understanding of AOVs and how light works and everything, it kind of just helps you. Yeah, they kind of just help you.
I'm a teacher. I teach at 2 colleges, and I have the opportunity to teach students that are, I think there's almost every visual effects house I can think of across the big ones that I've actually got to teach at 2 different colleges. And I always notice the really dedicated ones, for better or for worse, surprisingly, because the education system across the world is generalistic, and you have to take rigging and modeling and this and that, and you're like, I don't want that, I want this. I found out what I love. This is what I want to do. Why do I have to take this, and this? You know, and so I've found some of my most successful students would kind of just either just kind of avoid those classes or do the bare minimum. And you knew they weren't doing the bare minimum because they were lazy. They were doing the bare minimum because they needed, they went and got out online resources to learn. And they're like, the heck with this, I need to get good at this, so I'm going to go to VFX PhD, I'm going to go to Pluralsight, I'm going to go to whatever I need to get up to speed, and that's it. And you can't look at them as an instructor and be like, you lazy bum, get back to work, get over here and learn how to, do Houdini effects. You're like, no, I don't want to learn Houdini effects, I want to learn how to do new compositing. So exactly. It's a battle for me because I'm under the gun of, not under the gun, but I mean, you're under the rules and regulations and the setups of the Department of Education, which is more conformed to traditional education. And at the same time, you want so desperately to be like a big, school that kind of goes their own way, like Lost Boys. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, no, we ain't doing this. It's going to be 12 months of nuke and that's it, Yeah. So any opinions about that?
To be honest, I kind of wished that we actually had those schools in Romania. Well, in terms of something similar to either Lost Boys or Escape Studios or any other school that kind of focuses heavily on like one topic, because I think that those topics, that those courses and modules are pretty much what kind of kick out specialists, even from the junior level. Like, they probably know how to do shots, like full-scale shots. I'm not talking senior level, but shots. As in they can actually take something from start and just kind of pull it through with minimal supervision, probably. So I think the industry kind of needs more of those people.
Yeah, I see a serious need for, and I'm seeing the emergence of certain people that are popping up, that are creating, like you call, quote-unquote, shots. When you want a shot to comp, you want a shot. Even some of the stuff, I know you mentioned that you did my Pluralsight tutorial for deep compositing. Even that wasn't, in my opinion, a shot. It was just bare minimum, here's how to do this, you know what I mean? And that's because of the way that online training is and the length of time a comp takes to actually be comped together. You can't throw that together in 7-8 hours. And some of my tutorials run like 20 hours. So it is a problem we have, and that's educating people to do, as you say, shots, not just tiny shots, but shots. So let's go into your history a little bit, jumping over to your IMDb and talk about it. See, from what I can tell, if I'm looking at the dates, I mean, we're in 2019. This is reading 2016. You have a huge amount of history in the industry, almost trial by fire, in the last 2.5 years. But you're not necessarily a young squire. You've got some serious, names on your credits here. So obviously, I think you're in, as Tony was saying, when you're in, you're in. So I'm assuming you're in.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little history? I've actually watched an episode from The Young Pope here. Was that your first project?
Yeah. I've had my first shot to Roto and to prep on The Young Pope, and I've also started as a technical checker on it. And that show actually taught me quite a lot, even though I was doing some of the minimal work at DNEG, because I was like the new guy in the company. I had to understand how the company runs and everything, and how the pipeline is set up and everything. But in terms of technical checking and trying to look for edges and problems and, various issues that can appear with a shot, I've actually learned quite a lot. So then by the time the next show started rolling around, I was pretty much kind of ready to slide in and start doing some work. And I think my technical checker background actually helped me quite a lot, especially now in comp, right? Because I tend to fix all of my issues, and I tend to double and triple check my shot before I submit it, because I don't want it to kind of keep coming back to me like 10 or 20 times. I just want to be able to submit once, twice, or tops 3 times, and just have it through technical and through to the client.
Is there like an expectation that you would say that is normal for a hand-in of a shot to a technical checker, and if you get a kickback more than 3 times, that's bad news, or is there a number on that, or?
Sometimes it tends to be quite like inside of a bit of a gray area, because sometimes, for example, we have a shot declined in tech check, and then it has some more creative notes on top of it as well. So then you do the creative notes, and then something changed in your comp, like some color bit or an edge just changes, or you have to brighten up the background so your key goes a bit dark on the edges. So then if you submit without double checking it again, it's going to come back from tech check because in, hey, you have dark edges or something like that. So sometimes it can happen. It can actually happen quite a lot of times. And the bigger the shots, the more issues are going to pop up, like tiny pops in the mats here or there, stuff like.
So would you agree with Tony Lyons when he says, like, is there a transition happening where people no longer are starting as roto cleanup prep? Do you think that's like something that should be necessary as a starter? Or is that happening now, or are they still, at least at the, you're at a very, very large production house, so I'm assuming nobody goes in there and just starts out as a comp. If they're new blood, they basically have to go through and be a roto prep tech check type person. Then they move up the ladder.
Yeah. The entire tech check position is, I think it's specifically for the TV department right now. I'm not sure if film actually implemented it or if it is going to implement it yet. However, we still have some roto roles, even though a lot of the shots tend to go to external sites. Specifically, I think it's Chennai and Mumbai. The teams there tend to pick up quite a lot of the work. So I think the route then is probably going to be tech checker and then into roto prep to some extent to handle like some of the tricky shots that DNEG has to deal with, and then into comp. Yeah, that was my route.
Well, I don't want to jump into is everything I'm looking at here DNEG as far as on your IMDb? Yeah. Okay, cool. So when it comes to DNEG, how many like what's the flux of full-timer, like not full-time, but the flux of compositors on an average year there? Like you've been there obviously more than 1 year, but do you see people come and go? Do you see people get cut off, or they just go, obviously they go on to other studios and so forth, but what kind of numbers are we talking in regards to like compositors at that place? Because you're at the headquarter HQ, right? That's London.
Yeah. I think it tends to vary based on the project and the scale and the number of projects, obviously. So if we're in the downtime, a lot of the compers are going to go, and if we're expecting a large number of shots, then the company is going to be hiring en masse. For example, I've seen the company pretty much empty, and I've seen the company pretty much full, where we actually had to bring in new desks into rooms to fit people. So
when you say empty, do you mean like completely empty, or how many, like obviously they probably have some compositors that are there all the time, full-timers, right?
Yeah, no, I mean empty as in we didn't have any freelancers, and we had empty seats in quite a lot of rooms, pretty much. So they mainly only had the full-time employees, the people that were like 2 years plus, kind of thing, in the company.
Okay. So are you now working as freelancer, or are you like a full-time staff member?
I'm somewhere in between.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure how the law works yet. I just know that in order to become a full-time, you just need 4 years plus or something like that. I'm a bit short of that right now, so.
Your first impressions, if you don't mind me saying, being thrown into such a huge machine, double negative and so forth. What would you say is your first kind of impressions of the place? And obviously, it's your employer. I just but I mean, just like, and you like, I mean, was it pretty? I just remember working at a game studio for the first time. I was thrown into a production room and everyone's talking and they're speaking another language, but eventually you adopt the language that they're speaking. You're like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about now. Where you have all these big production head meetups and so forth. But your general experience, kind of being thrusted into such that large studio.
Honestly, at first it was very intimidating because I knew I was a junior and I knew that. So I was a junior, I was a tech checker. I didn't really know much about how production actually worked as a whole, but I was responsible with checking high-end comps and then telling people what was wrong with them. So that put me in a position where I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing, and I didn't really want to step on anyone's tail. So it was pretty hard at first to kind of understand that, hey, the job is to basically just find mistakes and report them, right? Because they knew what they were doing better than I knew what they were doing, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of throws you in a position where you're not really sure if you're supposed to flag this or if you're supposed to flag that. But all the people there are very friendly, and they tend to give people advice and help you out. And if you're stuck with something, they will basically just grab a seat and sit with you for like 2-3 hours and basically just show you around until you feel comfortable with what you're doing, right? And people tend to bounce ideas off of each other quite often. So it's actually quite a friendly environment to work in, even if it's a big company. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we're all human beings, it just comes to a point you're working with somebody, and that's just what it is. And the long hours are just part of the acceptance of what is the industry,
To be honest, in TV, we tend to not do too many long hours. Generally speaking, everyone kind of gets to leave at 6 on a regular basis. But on other shows, film tends to be very busy.
Okay. So on an average week, how many hours are you working in the television department at DNEG, if you don't mind me asking?
We tend to work kind of 9 to 6 or half 6 or 7. Sometimes it's basically just up to the comper. It's like, oh yeah, I basically just have this tiny thing to fix, so I'll just stay a bit over and just have it done with. Or sometimes you basically just stay for a chat with someone and time just passes and you leave at 7. But generally everyone gets to leave at 6, or most people at least.
Do most of the artists that are working at the studio, I don't know what traffic's like down there in downtown London, but do you guys do use your form of transportation to get back to your place of residence? Is it just like, the subways or or is it a car? Or isn't that even possible?
It's generally subway for a lot of people. Some people do take the train because they live outside of London, or, for example, in my case, I'm like a half an hour walk away from the studio, so I can basically just walk in and out.
Oh, wow.
Some other people just bike into work, various ways, to be honest. Even bus is a viable option.
Is traffic really bad in London? In case anybody's like, I want to move to London to buy a car, and work in the industry. Is that?
I definitely wouldn't recommend a car in central London, but
okay. Figure we get that out of the way. It's like,
yeah.
So, do you find that to be? So, did you find that a little? So, you're a little bit like intimidated in the fact that you're basically correcting people that got more years of experience than you do, but at the same time, they have the humility to accept their problems, and it's just part of the process.
I mean, it's not per se a problem. It's just like if you're a tech checker, you basically just have to flag things that can easily be missed, right? Because as a comper, you tend to be very busy. I mean, you tend to be buried under quite a lot of shots quite often, and the deadline tends to be fairly tight, so you just have to kind of kick out shots repeatedly, right? So a technical checker is basically just there to let you know that, hey, here's a problem, and it's better that I flag it now, and we basically just avoid the client having to send it back, right? So it's kind of one of those things. It's more of a, it's a bit of a cooperative process. It's more of a back and forth. Like if a technical checker flags something and you think that's supposed to be there, you can always just go to the supervisor and just talk with them. I mean,
cool.
From my personal experience, it wasn't actually a problem. It was like, hey, we have this node. I don't. Do you want me to address it or not? Yeah, fix it. Okay, fine. I mean, it's absolutely no bad blood or anything. It's just, hey, if it has to be done, it has to be done, and that's it.
If you don't mind, before we continue on with your history of your work, I think it's really great because you mentioned that the Vimeo link to the reel that you currently have is actually the reel that got you into double negative. Okay, so if you mind, I'd love to just play that, just so people, if they're curious, what does a reel that, at what level does a reel have to look in order for you to get into this company? And again, everyone would be like, love to just jump in double negative and so forth. So let me just play it through, and I'll put the volume down. I'll play it again. So let me just, of course, all editorial. So this is actually one of my tutorials, surprisingly. I feel honored. That thing was a nightmare. Yeah, it's... the only reason I did this tutorial was because nobody was doing any tutorials for the, whatchamacallit, deep compositing, so I thought I was figuring out. But I'll let you... actually, let me start again here just so we can... Go ahead.
Yes, but basically this one was actually your own lesson. It was just something on deep that I basically just wanted to give a shot and basically just try and do a version of those lighting enhanced with like a bit more lights and a bit of like fall off shadow and fancy things in the lens, like a bit of lens flare and stuff. If I remember, this one was like a matte painting tutorial from FX PhD and so on, and I just wanted to give a shot at keying and actually just putting the whole thing together. Same thing, FX PhD. I think Victor Perez did this one. He has a lot of good lessons on a lot of topics, including scripting.
Nice.
Yeah, this one's basically from the same lesson. It's just different shots. He was kind of doing an advert. Yeah, for this one I just used a DMP lesson from Digital Tutors, and I just filmed the friend on the green screen and basically just slapped him on top and just made it kind of like a full shot.
This one's lots of fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so this one was like a Mexico.
I went through this one, man. I was like, woo! Planar tracking on steroids, as I call it.
Yeah, this one was from FX PhD as well as this one. So they were mainly just cleanup or comp or like heavy shots that kind of needed a bit of everything. So you had to show that you understand color, you understand light, you understand how to kind of match things into place. And this one was just a quick kind of demo that I have a basic understanding of how to light, how to render, and how to comp CG. It wasn't the best of shots, but at least it was something that I kind of got to do personally while at uni, so it was like a tiny thing thrown in there.
Awesome. Yeah, what's interesting, in the midst of this trailer, I can see that you even augmented some of this to my tutorial. You put the drips down. I know that wasn't even in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was this was even me just sort of like, again, where I come from is Digital Tutors and all those sites. I didn't have FXP. I just, as in the last couple of years, started getting on FX PhD and learning. But FX PhD, God bless them, man. They basically, and you see a lot of people with the reels from these same clips, but this is what employers look for. They're not looking to say, oh, he made a unique shot on his own. No, he or she understands the reality of keying, of the little finessing, little tiny details, and that's what they're looking for. They're basically looking for someone they could trust to handle a shot because they know the little intricacies and little details, as opposed to the big monsters and creatures and all that stuff. Yeah. So, and you can get all that through FX PhD. So yeah, this FX PhD, like I said, was I talk about all the time. It was started by a company of artists at Hootenanny here in Chicago, and they're really awesome. I know them personally, and they're just so. They eventually moved their operations overseas and so forth, it was a collaboration overseas with Australia, but the stuff they've provided was incredible. This one was, I always say if you can get through some of these tutorials, then you should get a job, because some are pretty intense. This one I remember being very, very intense with the whole planar tracking process. I haven't joined this. I want to actually attack this one, because this one looks very, very, very interesting. So I would say, I mean, you would probably agree, right? Don't be insecure of the fact that you're using a shot that somebody else did or from a tutorial site. Really, it shows that you know what you're doing, because it's all the technicalities, all the real hard specifics are addressed in these videos.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So there you go, folks. Now I don't know if you got in by the I forgot what the analogy is, but like by the skin of your teeth or whatever. But you got in. That's the important thing. So definitely these little fine details. Don't be embarrassed to put stuff on your reel that is like just from another website. It doesn't have to be from you or shoot it for you shooting something. In regards to the interview process, how'd that go, and did that play a part really?
To be honest, from my experience, I've only had one interview in the industry, and that was the first one. To my surprise, yeah. But the entire process just went very smoothly. The interviewer was very friendly. We basically just had like a chat, like, hey, I'm X, you're Y. How about we just, I don't know, just have like a tiny chat from person X to person Y. And yeah, that was pretty much it. I kind of just tried to be honest and open. Like every time I was asked, like, what about that shot? What about that shot? I'd basically just be open and say, yeah, that's from here. That's from here. Here's what I did. Here's what they did. Here's what I did on top of it. Stuff like that. So I basically just tried to be open, because somehow I was extremely aware that they knew more than I did, right? So
yeah.
There was absolutely no point in lying about it. It was just, yeah, you probably know this tutorial. You probably know the person that did it, right? So.
Yeah, it's always intimidating when you stand, because they're at the same time putting on that political correctness face, which is, yeah, it looks good. At the same time, they're really looking at your work, and you can tell they know where you're at. You're like, so I think you just have to bow your head and just, yeah, it could always be better. And they ask you, how would you improve it? You just say, look, I would do this, this, and this, and
Yeah.
I keep saying this to my students, is like pioneer spirit. No one put a gun to your head and said, hey, you don't have to go. You could just go through your college. You don't have to go and get seek out online training and work harder. You made the initiative yourself, as opposed to just walking through the schools. I have so many students that, more than ever in the history of education, it is an epidemic of victim mentality with people that go to schools today. Mostly out of laziness. You'll only see the victim mentality most of the time via people that won't do the work, and so they just default to, well, it's your fault. It's just like, no, you're not doing the work. And it's just, it is a nightmare, I have to say. And that's my only concern. I'm thinking about writing a book about education, at least education in the form of liberal arts / visual effects / yeah. It's a wild ride. So anyway, getting back to you, Emerald City, again, just simple roto prep tech check work, and
Yeah. For that one, I think I was only doing tech check on a few episodes, and I think I had maybe 1 or 2 shots to rotor prep, but it was extremely basic, like locked off camera, just remove a wire, that was it. So yeah, I kind of started very slow. They kind of eased me into it. I wasn't really thrown straight in, like, hey, welcome, first day, here's your shot, 1,000 frame type of thing. No, it was just, hey, here's a shot, here's how you tech check it, you just basically A/B with the original version, like comp versus the original, and just see all the differences. And if you see something that looks funky, just come and ask me, and I can tell you if you should flag that or not. So it was a friendly process in the beginning. It was just the whole thing that I had to correct people with 10 years of experience. That was a bit kind of uneasy at first, so to speak.
So, Goodbye Blue Sky, is that a short film done over at DNEG?
No, basically, some people just saw my reel and they shot an email my way if I wanted to help them with like a few shots. And I was roto prep at the time, so I was like, yeah, I could definitely do it some comp practice. Just tell me what you need and I can help you out, yeah.
Cool.
So that was just something that randomly came into my inbox on my email one day, and I said, yeah, fine, let's go. I can definitely do it some comp work, especially right now when I was roto prep, so.
Stan Lee's Lucky Man, and that's just, was that like some kind of show or something? I don't even remember that.
It was a TV show with some guy that was in a lot of dangerous situations, but somehow he was lucky and kind of escaped all the time. I haven't really watched it. I just had to help with some pretty big shots towards the end of the show. I think it's on season 2, if I'm not mistaken. For a lot of these shows, for example, we basically just work on them, but we don't really watch them because we kind of already know how it ends. So in terms of story, we're kind of in the middle with it. We know bits and bobs, but we couldn't really put the whole show into like one whole idea.
Okay.
Well, also trying to avoid spoilers, so.
Gotcha. So, still working on television here, Will, Inhumans, and then Altered Carbon, which is a Netflix series. I call it the saturated Blade Runner.
Yeah, pretty much.
It reminded me of Blade, like, hey, it's Blade Runner. Yeah, I watched a couple episodes of that show, but what were you basically doing in Altered Carbon, if you don't mind me asking? Like,
so for Altered Carbon, I was somewhere in between roles. So I was doing some of the most trickiest prep roto shots, and I was also helping with comp, as in keying and set extension. And I also managed to get a pretty big shot towards the end. But basically, Altered Carbon was my entry into comp, so I kind of transitioned into comp by episode 6, if I'm not mistaken. I also had comps in episode 1, but I was still like hands-on, hands-off, kind of somewhere in between. But by episode 6, I was pretty much comp. So that kind of signaled like my entry into comp.
and you really kind of think about it, what is that, basically almost a year and a half, 2 years, and then you're in with the big boys and girls?
Yeah.
Cool. So then I believe Mission Impossible Fallout, we had one of our other people that we interviewed on the show, I'm trying to remember which one, I think it was Richard, who worked on it for a little bit. Do you know Richard Civillo? I'm going to tear his name apart.
I've seen him around in the new groups on Facebook, but I haven't personally spoken to him much.
You must have worked at a different post house on the same movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But how was that, jumping into a big Tom Cruise film?
Yeah, so both for Mission Impossible and Venom, I was fresh into my comp transition, and TV was running a bit low on work, so they basically just sent me into the film department to help them out on some prep shots, like fairly tricky, fairly easy. They basically just needed more hands on board. So basically, a lot of the people from TV just went over to film to help them out. That was pretty much it. I had like a bunch of prep shots spread across both shows, like Mission Impossible and Venom. And then I kind of just came back on TV, and I've done a few other shows yet, still yet to come. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Curfew's one that came out recently. I still have to update my IMDB because it's pretty old. But yeah.
So transitioning, obviously. Well, you're not transitioning. I always think, I'm sorry, I must have said somewhere in this interview that you worked in commercials. You're pretty much television, so.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got into that. Sometimes I confuse when someone's TV. When someone tells me TV, somehow I resort to saying, "Oh, that's commercials." It's not. It's basically movies. And as we're already aware, some of the best work going out there, quality-wise, visual effects and story-wise, right now, is these streaming services and some of these shows. And so, yeah, it's starting to transition there. I would say I'm starting to see the transition. I'm seeing it in just by going to a movie theater and seeing how many. Well, people will always go see the Marvel movies, but in the other movies that I see, the independent films, all that stuff, I don't really see a lot of people sitting in the chairs. And where I'm at in the States, they basically replaced max seating chairs with giant sofas to try to get you into the theater. I don't know if that's the same in London, but it just feels like everything's transitioning to more of an online streaming reality or an online theater experience. Would you say that the same thing, or am I just making guesses?
I think it kind of tends to shift, especially right now, because you can do VFX quite easily. I mean, the industry is growing at an exponential rate, so the more people are going to join, probably the bigger the TV VFX industry is going to get. And also, for example, a lot of these streaming platforms, they tend to have a lot of 4K shows. I mean, out of that whole list, I think Mission Impossible Venom were not 4K, and Stanley's Superhuman and Emerald City. But everything that I've done past Alter Carbon was 4K, and they're all like TV based.
Wow. And then, of course, the scrutiny of the shots. I just recently got the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. I'm going to be doing some tutorials with the 4K footage, but I've done 4K compositing before, and man, it is a world of difference as far as like the details and so forth. And I'm assuming it adds more work hours for you guys as well, just by the quality checking and all that.
Yeah, sometimes it can do. I mean, it's all about the magnitude of the shot and how much of the plate is supposed to remain intact. Mm-hmm. Because you obviously have those shots where you have to blow everything up or do something and change like 2/3 of the environment. And you also have some other shots where the background and everything should be exactly the same as it is. And those ones tend to get quite a lot of scrutiny because you're obviously going to affect certain areas, right? You just have to make it feel and look invisible. So those are probably going to be looked at with a very severe attitude.
Speaking outside of the compositing realm, because I got a lot of people on my website that are like, "Hey, why don't you talk besides compositing? Talk about simulations." 2 questions for you. One, what is the most in-demand sort of position right now at such as a studio, but it's hard to find, but still could be entry level? Like, is effects in Houdini big? Are you guys using Houdini, or do you have some proprietary software in regards to like Pyro and all that stuff?
We are using Houdini for effects. I'm not sure if we're using anything else. I think it's mainly Houdini. But for example, at least in London, I know there's an initiative to get younger people in. So as far as I'm aware, DNEG, perhaps Framestore, I'm not sure about MPC or ILM, probably they do too. But a lot of these companies started offering like apprenticeships for young people. So you can basically just come into DNEG. I think it's like 1 year, if I'm not mistaken, or half a year. And they basically just train you. And if they enjoy what you've been doing, they basically just offer you a contract on the spot. So that's a great way of getting new people in, and you basically just train them out, right? So they will know exactly how your company works and how everything is supposed to work, like in terms of the pipeline.
Is that do they get paid for that, or is it more like
yeah.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, they are paid. I haven't really spoken with them, but as far as I'm aware, I know I looked into the scheme, and my first thought was like, damn, I really wished that it was available when I was a student. Yeah.
Well, I'm seeing that across the board on these job sites and so forth in regards to when they're fishing out for people. I'm seeing a lot of postings for these major studios in Mumbai and Chennai. Chennai, is that how you say it? Being that you really only had, as far as like one big employer being DNEG, do you when you hear about, and we could keep it away from DNEG in regards to their opinions. From what you've told me, you've enjoyed working there, and it's a good place to work. But like when you hear about people that obviously come into DNEG, maybe do some freelance and head back out of other studios, do you see any shifting going on, or some high stress realities of the industry, both in the really just the political element of it, not necessarily political, but I mean, do you feel that there's a shift? Is there good job security? Is there just a lot more moving around? Do you see any trends that are moving either for the positive or for the negative in the industry itself, visual effects?
To be honest, as far as I'm aware, I know most studios kind of want to shift towards show-based contracts. If as far as I'm aware, a lot of them actually are show-based contracts. They're basically just going to hire you now until the end of the show, and then you're free to go unless they actually want to keep you. And I think it's been like this for quite a while now. I'm quite unaware with how these things work, because basically my first job was at DNEG and I haven't really left since. So I'm still kind of looking to understand how this whole principle kind of works. From what I understand, a lot of them tend to be like short-term contracts. How I started, it was like I had a 2-month contract first, and then a 6-month, and then they started doing yearly. So the 2 months was like a probation period to see if I'm worth the time and resource kind of thing. I think most companies tend to do that as well. So
you didn't see anybody that like didn't make the cut and they were like, you're out of here, or something, or it's just, and was it like an obvious like red flag on that case, or for most part were a lot of people that they hired on the front end, they actually knew that they were hiring good people in the interview process, and then they just stuck through it, or were those that just wouldn't make the cut and they said, sorry, you have to go?
I'm not sure about the first option, but I've seen a lot of people that came in, picked up the pipeline, and actually managed to do good work, and it was basically just them leaving. It was just either going to another studio or taking a sabbatical away from the industry, or just, sorry, projects are low in London right now and we can't really do much about it. And it was just one of those things. Like it tends to happen all around the industry. It's not company specific as far as I'm aware. But yeah, that's kind of the sad part of it.
Well, probably rubbing shoulders with giants. What would your opinion be, from what you've heard, is a good period of time that you would need a sabbatical?
Probably through winter. As far as I'm aware, November towards January tends to be kind of a low project period, as far as I've seen so far in my 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's when everyone sort of like hits the road and does some traveling, then comes back, or takes some time off and just chills, pretty much. Do you find that in your case, or have you been like nonstop for the last 3 years?
I tend to save my holidays because I just like to take a long period off. Generally in winter because I enjoy snowboarding, but yeah, that's just me. A lot of people just tend to do it in summer, or just 1 week now, 1 week a few months down the line, so on and so forth.
Cool. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of the line. You are working on a big project right now. We cannot disclose what it is, but you can verify it is a very, very, very exciting project. I'm assuming so. So let's we'll have to wait until the unveiling before. Of course, you guys are familiar. Those of you out there, a lot of these studios, specifically DNEG and I believe it's Framestore and MPC, they're very, very understandably protective of what it is they're working on. Do you find that sort of like non-disclosure reality kind of jarring when you have friends that talk to you and like, what are you working on? I can't tell you. Like you're working for the CIA or something. Or do they scare you when they bring you in the door, or is it just kind of like a decent understanding? Hey, don't be throwing this stuff up on the internet or nothing.
Yeah, I think it's more of the whole thing with like, please be careful where you post things, as in, don't give away too much. Obviously, don't post anything on the internet that can compromise it, because once it's on the internet, it's always going to be there, right? Someone can just copy paste their screenshot, and it's always going to be there, and it's out of our control. So obviously, don't post on the internet what we do and who our clients are. Uh, However, if it has been announced officially or something, then I believe it's okay. Even though some people might still kind of bat an eye, or yeah, sometimes it tends to be quite complicated.
So you got Godzilla at the DNEG here. King of the Monsters. That's coming out soon, right? May. Yeah. The Boys. Never heard of that. Hobbs and Shaw, Men in Black International. So these are some big heavy hitters. Are these all being done in London right now, or are they all over the world?
I'm not sure if they're all being done in London, because um, we do have companies opened in, I think, Vancouver. We have one in LA as well. Chennai, Mumbai. If I'm correct, I'm not sure if we have any in Australia, but we tend to be quite global, and we do have like several companies.
And just to be clear, I was in the last couple episodes mentioning Wonder Woman 1984. I was wrong. Uh, Mike is not working on Wonder Woman's 1984. Sorry for all the confusion out there, if you guys are wondering. I don't know. I had so many different interviews set up, and I got in the mix in the midst of the mix. I got kind of confused. I'm like, so. So anyway, let's jump into Q&A if you don't mind. Obviously, you guys have a ton of movies you're working on and so forth. I mean, it must be, in your personal experience at DNEG, is it pretty exciting? Does it seem like it's, do you feel, I think before we do the Q&A, I wanted to address this one question that I was thinking about today, which was the allure of this industry and the longevity of that allure. People think of VFX as in, this is, Hollywood / this is fun stuff, and it is. It obviously is. I love compositing. I don't care what it is. It's fun stuff, and you got to love that specifically, not just love the fact that I like watching movies or playing video games or all that. But the longevity of the allure of working in that industry, the reality that, and to a certain degree, sometimes the work hours and the longevity of the work is almost very similar to like a coal mine, where it's long hours. You get home, you hit the hay, you sleep, you wake up, do it again. Do you see anybody specifically at your studios that you've worked, where they're just like they just need to take a break, and the studio usually respect that and say, okay, you need to just chill for a while and take a break? And is there more of awareness at these studios, I should say, of the reality of possibility of burnout, and do they accommodate for that pretty well?
Uh, I'd say, at least from my personal experience, I was working very, very heavily on a show, and then when that show was done, they put me on a different show, but they kind of gave me very easy shots with a very wide interval between shots. So it's like, here's one shot, do it. I was doing it in a few days, and then I'd basically just have nothing for like 2 days, and then I had like a bit of a health problem, and they also took me easy, like even through, I think, 2 days I didn't have any shots, even though I was coming to work, and I kept telling people that I needed some work and stuff. So yeah, they actually look out for people as well. I think it tends to be quite a lot of stress in terms of deadline. Like if the deadline is really close, then the work has to be done. There's just absolutely no reason to not have to work in there. So crunch time is crunch time, and I think it pretty much applies to everyone. But to be honest, what keeps it alive for me is just the curiosity and the whole thing constantly being different, right? It changes, like with every show, with every shot. Mm-hmm. Everything tends to be different, because you work with different pixels, different light, different angles, different everything. So with every new shot, you have to kind of work a solution out, right? So everything tends to kind of change from project to project.
Could you we actually, believe it or not, we only have one question. I've been trying to get people to post more questions. If you're out there, if you go to my website, I'll put the links at the bottom. Tech Talk. We also review Reels. Also, if anybody wants to have any more questions, please post more questions. We have a lot more interviews coming and no questions. So please post up new questions and so forth. We have only one question left here. So anyway, just kind of throw that out there. I had one last question, sir. What's the whole workflow? I'm currently working on a deep compositing live action tutorial, and it's interesting kind of going through the deep workflow as best as I can understand it. But how does it work in a studio in regards to the deep workflow, if you don't mind me? If you can get a little techie with the talk on that. I'm just curious how that works, and is it really just for holdout mats, and do you save you have like a side EXR file you just pull out and just to pull mats, or how does that all work? I'm just curious.
I think it's, at least for DNEG, it tends to be shot specific from my experience. I haven't had a lot of experience with deep, but I am doing some now. So as far as I'm aware, they do render EXRs if you actually need deep, so you can actually get proper deep. If you can't get actual deep files because the time takes, so if for some reason you can't.
When you deal with deep, is it you said that the render engine that you guys use is what was the render engine you guys use again? I'm sorry.
We tend to use Clarice, as far as I'm aware.
Clarice, okay. So when you're rendering out from Clarice, when you basically get one file, and that's like a deep EXR, so to speak, image sequence, or do you get like two? Sometimes when people render it out of, say, Maya or something, you get like one pass and then the deep pass, and you combine those with the deep recolor node and all that. Is that something that you're familiar with, or?
Yeah.
Okay, is that pretty much it? And do you have to really, you're from a compositing background. I was just curious, like, do you got to really ramp up the samples on the renders of that to get to look good, and so that when you start dropping in deep elements, the way that they interpolate front and behind, they have to have high sample rates, or is that something? I'm throwing some really heavy tech questions at you. Sorry.
Yeah, so for example, it really depends on what you have to do, because for example in my shot, I only have to use it for holdouts, and for example if I have to hold out roto from a deep element, right, so from something that happens, I can just throw in a deep expression and basically just kind of add to the deep front like +1 value, like deep back +1, so that kind of makes the mats kind of expand a bit into depth, so the fall off of the roto is going to get a bit softer, right? So that kind of works if you actually just want to hold out roto from CG, like some rocks from let's say fog. So as far as I'm concerned, samples tend to be in like a good range, at least for my current situation right now. But if something goes wrong and something needs to be a bit different, people actually just kind of go in, fix the problem, and just help you out. As long as there's time.
There's always that.
Yeah.
What? How would you, and that's the whole thing. That's really something along the lines of the CG artist. That's his responsibility. I just was wondering if you knew. But how would you feel as the relationship? Is there a lot of back and forth between you and the CG artist? Like, hey, we need this pass, we need that pass. Hey, can you re-render this? I noticed there's always this relationship between the front end of the pipeline, or I should say the middle, which is the CG artist, and then there's the compositor at the end of the process. How would you say that relationship is, and is a big company like yours have that delegated to somebody else, or do you have to get up out of your seat or send emails and say, hey, I really appreciate this, and if you can do this and that?
I mean, personally, if it comes to me, I personally just prefer to go to the latter and talk to him personally. I think it just makes the whole process way easier, because we're not going to have a third person in the middle, like me talking to him and then the latter talking to him. And there's basically no way of kind of creating a big confusion. It's just, hey, so here's the problem. Could we do something, or do you want me to fix it in comp? Sometimes I have to fix it in comp, so that's fine. Some other times he can actually just kick out any render. So it's more of something. We basically just talk and see, like, if you're not too busy, could you do this? If you're too busy, it's fine. I can try to fix it in comp. If it's unfixable, then he'll have to kick out and render, so on and so forth. It's kind of like somewhere in the middle. It's more of a give and take. You help me now, I'll help you later, stuff like that.
Speaking on personal health, do you find yourself in the need to do a little bit of exercise, get out, get some fresh air when you do have some downtime?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, for example, I used to smoke, so I was kind of taking regular breaks. I'm not doing it anymore, but even now, I kind of still take breaks, and I haven't really had any problems with like people starting to look weird. But the fact that I kind of just go outside and take a trip around the building to kind of cool my mind and yeah, be able to just have a quick restart, come back to work, sit down, and
I could do a whole episode on walks, because I noticed when I was working with these compers, like, going for a walk, and I'm like, you guys love taking walks. And I understand why. I'm like, okay, to get your head, you know, there could be a whole book about, you know, walks for VFX artists, you know. I just find that it was literally like 3 months of being thrown in front of people, or 2 months, I should say, and just learning about the industry from all of these pros that were flowing out from LA, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see. But yeah, I see a lot of guys, they like climb. When I was in Chicago, we used to take walks and go up and always get to the top of buildings. You know, that was the goal. Like get you know, the building across the way. Let's get to the top of that building and just look out at the city and just chill out. You know, some of them were smokers, so they'd smoke. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the general thing, is just making sure. And then you're also learning guitar, from what I can.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pick some different things out. It's probably something that I picked up from being interested in comp. I think curiosity is very important, especially for this job. It's more like, in how many ways can I get this thing done, right? Because if you only know one technique and you only apply that technique to every shot, sometimes it works, but some other times you're going to be stuck quite severely on a shot because something happens and you don't know what's happening, and you need to find a solution, but it doesn't work. Like, your only arrow doesn't work, right? So what do you do? So I think curiosity is very important, like being able to just pick up something, or trying to understand how vectors work, because sometimes you might have to distort something and not just transform it, or yeah, basically just various things. So I kind of took that and I just brought it into my real life. So now I'm trying to learn guitar. I'm trying to learn some coding as well, just something on the side to kind of keep me busy apart from comp.
We have a question here from Lone Tusker. Real talk, what are the mandatory would-be wise kind of shots to be included in a compositing show reel?
So if you're aiming to be comp, I think a lot of interesting things, for example, have a good breakdown of keying. Be very specific with your keying breakdowns in terms of, do you have a core mat, do you have an edge mat, how do they look, are you using additive, do you know how to use additive key, can you key without an additive key, because sometimes if you have, if the shot's going to go to be split in stereo, you can't really use additive or multiplicative tricks, so you're going to be able to have to key complex shots without it. Try to avoid perfect scenarios in terms of green screen or in terms of prep. Like, even if you have a marker, try to have an actor crossing in front with the marker. Don't just have it somewhere randomly in the background, because everyone can do that with about a week of training. So it's very important to kind of just try and simulate real life, and you also have to try and improve quality quickly, because no one's going to watch 6 minutes to see a good shot at the end, right? But a lot of people just want to see quality in the first 30 seconds, and if you got them there, they're going to watch it until the end, or they're basically just going to take your name and just send it over to the recruiter. So yeah, basically just try to recreate the production situation, and that's pretty much going to help people understand that you can actually do the job.
Is true stereo, is that still going on in compositing, or is a lot of it 2D 3D conversion outsource, or 3D 2D conversion outsource?
A lot of it tends to be 2D 3D conversion. So for example, when you bag and tag elements, everything needs to be separated. But if you have a multiplicative key, for example, or an additive where you actually just plus the foreground on the background, you can't really break those. So you're only going to have the background with your character embedded on it, right? So when they try to kind of break the layers apart, it's not going to work properly. So you won't be able to do a lot of comp tricks when you work on a stereo project, so you're going to be able to show that you have strong understanding of basics, pretty much.
From judging from the new people coming in the door at your studio, and obviously those are from the people that are hiring that are saying, yeah, bring them in. If you were to recommend an avenue of education for VFX, what would that avenue be specifically? Would you say something like, are you seeing a lot of Lost Boys? Or is there any school you're like, wow, I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing here? And also, oh, well, it seems like a lot of these people are using the FX PhD training. Is there any recommendation of different sites of training to get started and really like up the game so they can be, ready to go in regards to stepping into roto prep and getting a job, say, at your studio?
So, honestly, I see a lot of people coming from Escape, or at least they have a lot of T-shirts from Escape Studios because I keep seeing them everywhere.
Wow.
The other one, yeah, schools that are very similar to Escape, right? So Lost Boys and all the other ones. I know there tends to be several ones. I just can't really grab the names right now. Or just try to apply for an apprenticeship at a studio. That's probably the best option. If you have an interest, just try to do something, try to grab some lessons, build a tiny portfolio. I don't think they have high expectations from people for the apprentice role, just a big interest and just be curious and want to do stuff, right? So yeah, mainly just things that focus heavily on skills.
So,
like a course where you have something to do and where you don't really do a lot of extra things, just comp, and you learn a lot of comp, and you learn a lot of the process of everything. Yeah, generally speaking, just specialize in something.
despite the influx of demand for VFX work, both in television, streaming, and film and commercials across the world, for those that decently know what they're doing, is it pretty heavy competitively to get a gig at DNEG? Starting up, so to speak? Not necessarily somebody transferring over and getting a senior compositing position, but somebody that's like starting out, like a
Okay, so just entry,
fresh blood,
kind
so
of.
to speak, yeah.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure because I see runners being promoted at DNEG quite often. So as far as I'd assume, they tend to hire new runners and kind of bump them up to either tech check or roto in film or match move in 3D, so on and so forth, right? So
And
they
runners
kind of
are...
open.
Go ahead, sorry.
They tend to open new avenues quite often. Because, for example, they have like this green light program, which is, again, I think it's UK based. I'm not sure if it's global, but they tend to get people post uni to apply as an internship. They also have an internship that's for students, so that's between second and third year, and they also have the apprenticeship now. So from where I started, when I started, they only had the green light for graduates, and now there are like 2 other options, plus the tech check routes, where you just apply as a normal runner and you just work up to tech check, or you just come in as a tech check. It's pretty much what happened to me and a friend. We both kind of started as tech check. If I'm not wrong, I think we were the first in DNEG, the first tech checkers, which was quite interesting.
So pretty much, though, you need to take that leap of faith and literally move from Romania and jump over to the UK and be like, okay, I'm going to apply. Or when you interviewed with DNEG, were you still living in Romania, or you were officially living already there, so they weren't like, oh, we got to wait for this kid to move over and all this, or what,
I was in Bradford. I barely just finished my studies, so I think I finished my 3rd year
That's
in May.
right. You were educated there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was in Bradford, about 6 hour drive away. So I just drove the whole night, went to the interview, got the interview, and basically just turned home. I got a phone call, started packing, and I was back in London by Monday, and my interview was Thursday, right? So it was a very interesting week, very rushed as well. But yeah,
It's
if you have to do it, you have to do it.
where do you see the? I mean, you're 3 years in, and I'm sure you're, like I said, you're rubbing the shoulders with giants and veterans. Where do you see the industry, as best as you can see it, in say 10 years, in your opinion?
It's a very interesting question because I haven't really thought about it so far. Um, Honestly, I think it's probably going to be way more open source, and maybe with the new tech like cloud and stuff, people might be able to do work from home. So you're probably just going to have like this main server. I don't know. I might be going a bit too sci-fi right now, but with the updates on the cloud, I definitely see it as a possibility. At least for a freelance-based company, like you can basically just have like a decentralized company, and everyone basically just contributes to like a file server stored somewhere. Uh,
So that's
yeah,
interesting. So the future of VFX will to be determined by how successful the cloud is and how much you can implement security measures on the cloud. Pretty
it could
much.
be.
Cool. Well, sir, it's been a lot of fun. Do you have anything you'd like to share with anybody out there before we close shop tonight?
Uh, I still have to make a lot of things happen because, to be honest, I'm actually planning to start helping and then start basically just uh, give away some tips and tricks and stuff on comp. I haven't had the time to do it yet, but I should be able to get to it soon enough, and I'll definitely be sharing it across.
Yeah, I mean that seems like that's what everybody. It seems to. I think we need more sharers. I've tried to share the very little information that I have, and surprisingly, I'm kind of shocked as far as how many people are following my website. I'm just like, hey, I'll try. I don't know what to tell you. Just learn what I can as much as I possibly can to give out. But I really think the future is going to be the need for experts like yourself, experts like Tony, and others. And even if they need to, and people are willing to pay, financially. Even you can see the example through Hugo's desk,
Yeah,
to pay to be educated and to learn more about this stuff. And yeah, it might be pricey because the amount of money that an educator gets is not as much as somebody who works at a visual effects production house. And unfortunately, because of that, a lot of the people online, and maybe even including myself, because I might not be an expert on everything, there's stuff I'm sure when you went through my tutorial on, deep compositing, nowadays you probably look at it as amateuristic, but I literally was just trying to study something and learn it and try to do my best to kind of teach it because no one had done the training before. So every
yeah,
time I do a training video, it's always like, I want to learn something that is new and fresh and is not like all the other typical tutorials, just, new technologies and so forth. And that I think is going to be the need. There's got to be some sort of, education. We've got, like you mentioned before, Escape Studios, Lost Boys, FX PhD. Those are growing. I really wish FX PhD would start producing more content. If you're out there, FX PhD, please produce more training. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if pirating is basically, because again, I mentioned this before. I have friends who have big websites in game training. They have disappeared off the map. They were known. They were in all 3D magazines for their training, and they have stopped producing training for the sole reason because of pirating. And I think as much as everyone's like steal from the rich and give to the poor, I don't care, whatever it takes. I think we as a community have to respect educators of VFX a little bit better, and not just go jump on a torrent and download something. You know what I mean? It's just Anyway, that's my little speech. But anyway, if anybody
Yeah.
need to get your website is currently down, or just you haven't updated in a while. You're understandably busy.
It's currently down because I've only used it as a platform to put my CV on, so I can actually get my first job, and then I basically just took it offline. But it should be back. It should be back fairly soon, hopefully in the next few months. But yeah.
But you guys can check them up on IMDB. And can you pronounce your first name again, just so I don't mess it up? Yeah,
It's Mihai.
Mihai. Okay.
Yeah.
But you go by Mike at the studios.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you can see his IMDb, his history. He does have a LinkedIn. And again, if you want to learn a little bit about his background in education, University of Bradford. Again, I agree there's such a need for the reality of online training. In other words, going online, not just learning from schools, and looking at more of the trade school route, which is going to escape studios, going to these studios that don't necessarily give you a degree. You know, I think as VFX artists, we got to stop thinking about the degree thing. You know, so with that said, I think that's pretty much it, sir. Do you have any closing thoughts or just anything else you'd like to say to people out there?
Mainly just thanks for having me on, and I really hope I actually managed to help someone or inspire someone to basically just become calm and just, I don't know, put their head down and just work. It's pretty much all it takes, to be honest. It's just hours and hours and hours of just you in a monitor, and yeah, just keep putting work, because a comp is never done. It's just a matter of time and money, really.
So put your head down, do the work, fake it till you make it. I'm collecting all the phrases. All right, sir. Thank you a bunch, and I guess we'll see you back maybe 6 months from now. We'll just see how you're doing, if you don't mind. If you'd like to be interviewed by then, if you're not too busy. So.